Aloha and welcome to Hawaii Together on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. I'm your host, Keli'i Akina, and the president of the Grassroot Institute. As we now approach what may be a new normal following the pandemic crisis, we've got time to reflect on some of the problems that we faced as a society. One of the problems was that thousands of citations were issued for violations of the COVID emergency laws. Not only has that created a backlog of cases in the courts, it raises the question of whether all such violations should be considered criminal offenses. To say the least, there has been a great deal of confusion in the public. Even the United States Surgeon General ran afoul of the law by venturing into a public space. So today I've got with me someone who understands what's going on. He's somebody who can give us some insight into the solutions that the legislature has come up with in Bill SB 540, and also his insights on what took place and where we should go. My friend today on the program is James Tabe. He's our state's public defender here in Hawaii. Been with the public defender's office for since 1993. James Tabe, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Would you just tell us what the public defender's office does? What is your mission? How do you carry it out? Who do you do that with? What kind of resources are you working with?
Okay, well, we're state funded. We are tasked with anytime, well, on TV shows you hear you have the Miranda rights. You have a right to an attorney. Well, that's who we are. If you're charged with a crime, you can't afford an attorney. One will be appointed for you. We are the ones that are going to be appointed for you if you couldn't afford an attorney and are facing a crime that involves jail time or possible jail time. So that's basically what our office does, and we are quite busy.
Now, how big is your office? At one time, the resources was a real problem for the public defender's office.
Yeah.
How's it look today?
It's always been a problem. We've always have to count our pennies, do our best with what we have. We have about 90 attorneys statewide. Most are on the island of Oahu. The budget cuts, I believe we've lost six positions, five attorney positions and a couple of staff positions. So, but we're making do. We do our best with what we have.
Well, James, there's been a lot of news about the thousands of citations that were issued since the beginning of the pandemic for violations of the governor's emergency orders. And I think we're up to 19 or 20 of those orders right now.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how bad administratively has the situation been, and how's it affected individuals in our state as well as the court system?
Okay. When the governor issued his first order, it's not just the governor's orders, by the way, it's the mayor's orders as well. So we've got a lot of sometimes conflicting, or it's quite confusing because you just mentioned there's 19 orders, and I don't know how many mayor's orders of each county had, but last summer at one point, toward the end of summer, there were 60,000 criminal citations for violating an emergency order on Oahu alone. And
That's staggering.
That's just last summer. Now, for perspective, what is 60,000? In 2019, the island of Oahu only had 20,000 criminal cases. So just this one type of offense just tripled everything. You got to add that on to what our normal caseload is as well. And so I would imagine, obviously, that was back at the end of summer. I don't know what the count is now. The pace has slowed down on each island, fortunately, but yeah, it's created a huge backlog at this point. It just went out of control. The police agencies were not giving warnings, and they were just issuing citations, what we call citations for all sorts of things. It's just not, everyone thinks it's just, now everyone thinks it's just masks. We're not wearing masks in public places or indoor places, but back then it was, couldn't go to the beach, couldn't go to the park. Okay, then you go to the park. It's okay to go into the water. There was a lot of confusion, just that alone. So people were getting cited left and right on that. I remember the lieutenant governor had a Facebook post, daily Facebook post back then, and he would tell us what's okay. And he wrote down parks, okay, beaches, okay, and or no, ocean okay, beaches, and he wrote, the three letters WTF because he didn't even know whether it was okay or not at one point. Then there's also curfew violations, and then at one point we all had to stay home, and the only reason why we could leave the house or the home was for essential activities, work, grocery shopping, food, etc. But that's confusing too because people, just if you left the house and you didn't look like you're going to and from work or to and from an essential activity, people were cited for that. So
Right. In fact, sometimes you could be restricted from being in a certain place simply by the activity.
right.
Parks would be okay if you were actually exercising
If you're moving,
in that
right.
moment.
Yeah.
Now, it's kind of spun out of control a bit and became a real challenge in terms of tremendous number of citations being issued. Can you give some examples of how it really got extreme?
Well, I think people thought as long as we're not loitering too much, it's okay to go onto the beach because because back in May or like this time of season, everyone's taking graduation photos and they don't like to just, they did it on the beach. Well, we had one story I was told that the police officer came up to them and says, "You can't be here," and then they even took the camera and took a photo of them and gave them a citation, for being on the beach. Gave the adults, and unfortunately, if the graduate was 18, he would get a criminal citation as well. I mean, to start off, so it was horrible. We had a family of four, I guess, decided just to stay in their car to drive around to get out of the house during the shutdown period. They went to Round Top, and just to walk. They didn't even get out of the car. The officer pulled up, talked to them, and gave the father and mother a citation. They had two little kids in the back of the car. I had an attorney, and I don't want to name names because I think he worked for a prosecuting agency. He was in the white step off the sidewalk to tie his shoe, was in the park area or the beach area, got cited for tying his shoe. I mean, it was it's
incredible.
Crazy.
That's incredible.
Yeah, people were just going fishing. They thought it was okay. I mean, people just didn't know because people didn't read. A lot of people don't read the governor's orders or mayor's orders, and some people don't really watch the news as intently. So all these activities that people thought were okay because it was just out of control. I guess it just to that point.
I think you told me a story about somebody who stopped to buy a coffee at a store.
Oh yeah, that's true too.
Which is an essential activity, right. At least at least for me. Yeah. What happened there?
It's classified just to go to restaurants or go to the store. Someone went to get a cup of coffee, and plus you get your exercise to that point too. You just walk. So they went, got their cup of coffee. It was I guess a relatively long. They finished their coffee and then obviously threw it away responsibly. On the way back, he was cited for being out and about. Try to explain, the story. Basically, he could just tell it to the judge, kind of attitude, and so that's what happened. And, so there's people. I mean, obviously, you mentioned in your introduction, the Surgeon General, I would imagine was just driving around the island and said, "Oh, look, I don't know what he saw or what his party saw. He got out to look at to look at the ocean, and all of a sudden, he gets cited for being on the beach at that time. So it's just people got off the bus sometimes just going home and from work or from work, some essential activity, and they would get stopped and cited. It was, obviously, more happened within the town limits. I had, in the Honolulu district area, because where I live, it didn't have, I see that strict enforcement at all. So,
James, I know that you're on the defender side, but what were police officers saying? What were they? What was their experience in having to enforce these regulations, which seem so difficult to understand by the public?
Right. Well, I guess back then, I mean, we didn't know anything about this disease, right? So, I mean, it was true. Almost a level of panic here. I mean, we shut everything down, right, at that point. I know the mayor, was wanted, at that point, was very concerned about, flattening the curve and all that. I just didn't understand why we didn't get warnings. Because most of these, like most of these individuals, I think that I talked about wouldn't do it again, if they got stopped. And
Now, there's an entire category of individuals who may have been especially challenged during this period of time, the houseless, those who
right.
didn't have residences. Oh, what was the experience with that?
Well, first of all, the houseless and the people, that are just living on the street, the CDC recommended that they shouldn't be charged and cited or made to forced to be moved around. So the governor's orders actually indicated that they have this exemption. However, the houseless, the people on the street, the people living in the parks, were cited constantly. One example I had, and it was brought to in my attention because by a news organization, they asked me and they gave me a drop down list to make a comment. But one individual received 18 citations for being in the park, curfew, no mask, and it just varied. And and like half of them were given on one day. So, it's easy pickings. An officer would drive by and give them a ticket. Another one probably drove by, gave them another ticket. So, um, I don't know. I don't know why. I don't want to get into the politics of this, what happened, but there was a point when they had a zero. I mean, I think the police said they had a period of time they gave warnings, then all of a sudden it became a zero tolerance policy, and that's what happened. And I think it was just too easy because all you had to do is take your ticket book out, write a citation like it's a parking ticket, and that was it. It was simple to do.
Now, wasn't it the case during this time, and even still now, that many of the houseless individuals who are cited simply don't show up
Right.
in
Yeah.
court? Now, what kind of problem does that create?
Well, this is going to create a double problem. And for a lot of people, when you don't show up to court because it's a criminal citation, a warrant gets issued, or even sometimes the penal summons gets issued. But if a warrant issues, then the police officer, if you get stopped again, they will actually physically get arrested. And you get arrested, brought to court, and then you'll have to appear before the just spend a night in jail, maybe. If it's a weekend, it's a weekend in jail, and then to get released and say you got to show up to court the next time, or at that initial court hearing, they may be able to take care of their cases at that point. So yeah, those people, then we get more arrests, and then all of a sudden we move them out of their system. That they get more contact with other people. They get going into jail cells with more people. So there's social distancing issues, and we get all these kinds of problems when people didn't show up to court. Uh, it created even more backlog because not only was there the emergency order crime, it was not showing up to court crime as well that they had. So we had it just made the problem worse.
Well, thanks for giving us all those examples, James. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to ask you about the difference between a misdemeanor and a basic citation, and because that factors heavily into the problems that have ensued and maybe a solution that we can take a look at. My guest today is James Tabe. He's the prosecutor. He's the defender. The head of the Office of Public Defender here in the state of Hawaii. We're talking about some of the problems logistically that were created with the emergency orders during the lockdowns. We'll be right back. Don't go away. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, Hawaii Together. Welcome back to Hawaii Together on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Today, talking about a very important issue having to deal with the inadequacy of our existing laws to handle the citations that were issued under the lockdown orders to deal with the COVID virus. Now, I realize that some of the stories that we've listened to sound ludicrous. I mean, so much so that they provoke laughter. But when we really think about it, these situations are rather heartbreaking and very troublesome, probably, for those who went through the situation. And I know that our Office of Defender, the head of that, James Tabe, has that sensitivity as well. What I want to ask James now is this, and welcome back. Thanks for being here. These citations were actually what we call misdemeanors.
Right.
And I'd really appreciate it if you could explain what that means for the average person who gets a citation and what the legal ramifications of that are.
Yeah, the term citations and violations that were being bandied about the past year or so, they're a little bit misleading. Because usually citations would mean refer to like getting a parking ticket where this just pay a fine. But these emergency order violations are actual misdemeanors where they're punishable by up to 1 year in jail. Now, before we get everyone worried, no one has received 1 year in jail, and I don't think anyone received any jail time. They mostly, practically all have just paid a fine. But it's a crime. So if you are cited for this, you potentially will get a criminal record if you're found convicted of this. And for most people, and I think of the 60,000, like I think last year was the first time we had brand new alleged criminals, so to speak. No one has ever been accused of a crime until last year. So, being in, so when you're being charged with a misdemeanor offense, like the emergency order violation, like I said, if you're found guilty, it's a crime. It'll go on your permanent criminal record. I mean, and this is a big deal because if you ever filled a job application or scholarships or there's questions, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Well, this is something where you have to check yes on. And a criminal record also affects your professional life, like it would affect my professional license. I think other professions have that. I believe that the military, it may cause a problem with the military. I think that's one of the reasons why the Surgeon General pled not guilty and was going to fight this case all the way through because he could not have a misdemeanor on his record.
And James, let me just add to that. I was recently renewing my TSA pre status to fly and go quickly through airports. And reflected on this just this week when I saw numerous questions asking me whether I had a criminal record. And
Right.
this is serious. What are some of the real practical consequences for people who are charged with a misdemeanor?
Yeah, so basically, because it's a misdemeanor, you can't just mail in your ticket or mail in your fine or just resolve it quickly. You have to actually appear in court. So, and you may have to make multiple court appearances because once you appear in court, you have, because it's a misdemeanor, you have a right to a jury trial. So one of your court hearings is whether you want to give that right up and just say, no, I want a bench trial. And so, and you also, that's where my office gets involved because there's a potential jail. You have a right to an attorney, and if you don't resolve your case, right away, you should get an attorney because of the consequences. Like it has these unintended consequences of having a criminal conviction. And you can't afford one, we get appointed. But if you can't afford one, well, it's going to cost you a lot more money than the actual fine here because lawyers aren't cheap. And so that's the problem we have here with these cases is that it's because of the seriousness of the offense. You have to treat it like, because a misdemeanor is like assaulting somebody or stealing over $250 at a store. I mean, we're talking it's a criminal record. So that's so the court involvement is much more extensive than just the parking ticket. as a citation. It's because it's a crime. Most crime, most like most misdemeanors are usually you get arrested on it, but here it was easier to issue these citations that look like parking tickets. So um,
James, what kind of financial hardship has to be demonstrated in order to qualify for representation by the public defender?
well, there's no set dollar amount, so to speak. We do follow the guide, the poverty guidelines, but if you have a lot of debt or you have a lot of a large family, or you're out of work, or your uh, nest egg, or your is low, we would take you on. We would help you. We try not to, we try not to turn away too many people, because we know that person that even working, both both the husband and wife working, it's very costly, because an attorney would cost something like this may cost thousands and dollars, at this point, just to fight something small like this. So I mean, fortunately, we most of the cases didn't come, or not most, but a large number of cases, the prosecutors actually had some discretion to dismiss some cases. So, but you still had to appear in court, or they decided they offered the defendant, because you are now, a criminal defendant. Uh, Look, we'll reduce it to a violation equivalent to like jaywalking or some sort, where it's non-criminal, and if you agree to pay a fine. So many people took that, did that option, but other people weren't given that option, or adamant that I'm not going to plead guilty to anything that I didn't do that was wrong. I want, so they proceeded on, and it required multiple court appearances, and then involved us too, to get involved and see if we could get the case dismissed or go to trial on them, or we you know do whatever we can at that point.
James, as a public defender, what's your experience in dealing with these kinds of cases?
Yeah. So most of the time, because of the risk, because of being found guilty, even though if let's say you're not guilty, if you've got a fine, convert it and avoid the record. A lot of people say, I've been going to court, even though the court is by Zoom or by virtually done. I'll just pay the $100 fine or $50 fine, whatever it may have been. So we're able to get it reduced, get it dismissed. Explain the circumstances. Sometimes we have to go to trial. Usually it's a judge trial, because people didn't want to spend 2-3 days in a jury trial. But we did have one jury trial on the island of Maui. The person was charged with violating an emergency order and being at a park when it's closed. So the taxpayers spent 2-3 days of getting 12 jurors, spending 2-3 days in court. The jury came back not guilty, and because the person didn't want to take this plea bargain of a $75 fine, of some kind of a non-criminal offense. So it's it has created. That's where, as a public defender's office, that's where we got involved, and we had all these other cases to deal with as well, and we just had to have these extra cases, which I really think we should not have. We shouldn't have had, but we did. So it did burden, created
Sure.
more of a burden for us.
Well, at some point, it became clear that the citations were creating a problem for the whole system in terms of its impact on the judiciary. We've only got a few minutes left, but tell us, when did it become evident that this was a problem, and how big was that problem?
Yeah, it became evident right away, I thought, but we actually got together back in October, because there was no solution. We didn't think, then we thought, if we just had, the governor had the power to impose a different sanction, like an infraction, like equivalent to a speeding ticket or a seatbelt violation or jaywalking, non-criminal offense. So that's what the judiciary, the attorney general, the prosecuting agencies, our office, police departments, we all agreed upon this. So the attorney general drafted a bill, SB 540, and which made it so this type of offense can be treated as an infraction, so a non-criminal matter. And so basically, if you want to contest the case, you just write out a statement, just like I don't know if anyone's got a parking ticket or a speeding ticket. Oh, that's what you got to do. If the judge believes you, he'll dismiss it. If he does it and you don't agree, you can ask for a trial at that point. But it'll be quick and simple. So it streamlined everything. And the risk, and the best thing about it is that the risk of having a criminal conviction is taken away. So it's the
Well,
worst you're gonna get is pay a fine.
currently SB 540 is SB 540 is sitting on the governor's desk.
Right.
Some people are a little bit afraid of that, especially in terms of whether it could result in a lot of very expensive tickets. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot better than with the system we have now. Because if we didn't have SB 45, or if it doesn't pass, we're going to be stuck in the same position. If you violate a mask violation, you're going to get charged with a misdemeanor. Now, if it's a mask violation, you'll be charged with an infraction. And to deal with it, and let's say if you think you're guilty, you'll end up paying the same fine probably, but without all the extra hoops that you have to go through to get there, and without the fear of getting a criminal conviction at that point. Yeah, there was a lot of fear that, oh my goodness, they're going to issue more tickets, but I would think that they would issue the same amount of tickets, or now I would imagine hopefully this pandemic is see the end of the light. We'll see much fewer violations at this point.
Would people who felt they'd been cited unfairly still have a way to appeal?
Yes, basically, if you are, you could, like say, you could write a written statement saying, "Look, I explained to the judge. If the judge doesn't agree with you, you can actually have a trial. So you can actually have, the officer come in and you play your side of the court. The officer will say what it, it's like a little trial you'll have. So you can contest this case. It's not a done deal. It's like any other offense. You have a right to a trial, and you will get one if you're adamant. The risk is that risking a trial would mean probably paying the same amount of fine as you did, if you had pled guilty. It's so I think it's beneficial for everyone at this point, especially for the person who's alleged to have committed a violation.
Well, that's great. Well, James, thank you very much for being with us today. You've explained a lot, and I appreciate your insight.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Anytime.
And to everybody, my guest today has been James Tabe, who's the Hawaii State Public Defender. We appreciate his hard work and look forward to seeing this whole situation resolved soon. I'm Kelii Akina with the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. This is Hawaii Together. We'll see you next time. Aloha.